Welcome to your next Entrench Learning Solutions training module, The History of Beer. Training where you want it, when you want it. Hi, I'm Grant.
Hey, I'm Matt. Hey, Grant, did you know that beer is over 7,000 years old?
Ew, I wouldn't want to drink beer that's 7,000 years old.
Grant, I didn't say that you were going to drink beer that old. I said, did you know that beer was first made over 7,000 years ago?
Wow, I had no idea.
It's true. According to some, beer is one of the oldest drinks humans created, dating back to the 6th millennium BC.
How is that possible?
Most records say that beer was made by accident when barley was accidentally fermented in water. Come to find out that fermentation, or when sugar is converted into alcohol, appears naturally in nature.
Wow, that's really cool. What happened then? Did they start to can it and sell it?
No, Grant. The can wasn't invented until the early 1900s. I'm talking about when beer first began as barley, water, and fermented sugar. In fact, hops weren't even added until the year 882 AD.
Matt, this is fascinating. What else can you tell me about the history of beer?
Grant, there's so much more to tell, so I'll just give you some of the basics. Here are the highlights and some funny things you may not have known about beer and its history.
Okay, I'm all ears.
Did you know that in ancient Egypt, if a man gave a woman a sip of beer, they were considered married?
Oh boy, I might be married to a whole bunch of women then.
Grant, that isn't the case anymore. That was in ancient Egypt.
Oh, that's a relief.
But it's true. Beer was considered something very special hundreds and even thousands of years ago. The evolution of beer begins about 7,000 years BC when some archaeological evidence says that people were brewing beer as a way to serve their gods.
To me, I think beer was made by the gods.
I know, Grant. Beer is pretty awesome.
Tell me what happened next.
Over the next few thousand years, the recipe for beer expanded, developed, and eventually became the beer we know today. Back then, beer was often made with sap or corn and even bark. Somewhere about the year 880, the first recorded use of hops in the brewing process was written. In the year 1040, the world's first operating brewery obtained the first license to brew beer. It was given to a group of abbey monks. The monks were really good at making beer, you know.
I had no idea.
Then, and this changed everything for brewers and consumers of beer, in 1516, the country of Bavaria, in what is now Germany, passed what they called a Bavarian purity law. It states that all beer in their region could only contain 4 ingredients: barley, hops, yeast, and water. That's all.
For real? How do you only brew beer with 4 ingredients?
Well, it's not easy. The brewers there became some of the best in the world. Much of the beer we drink today came from the brewers who were from that region.
Were those beers ales or lagers?
Grant, that's a great question. Most of those beers were considered ales. And as you probably already know, there are only 2 different kinds of beers, ales and lagers.
You've told me that before, but I can't remember which is which.
It is hard to tell the difference when you're just looking at a beer. You really can't see, smell, or taste the difference between the 2.
So what is the difference?
Technically speaking, when beer is fermented, it happens one of 2 ways, either top fermented or bottom fermented.
Let's not get too technical, Matt.
Okay, I agree. What you need to know is this. All the beer in the world falls under 2 different categories of beer, either ales or lagers. Ales are top fermented and lagers are bottom fermented.
Okay.
All beer needs to sit before the natural reaction of the sugars are turned into alcohol. Ales need less time. Lagers need more. Ales are some of the first beers to ever be brewed. Lagers are relatively new to the brewing scene.
Okay, if the ancient Egyptians brewed ales first, who brewed lagers first?
Well, back to my calendar. Bavarian breweries started lagering beer around the 15th or 16th century. They introduced their lagers to much of Europe over the coming centuries.
Wow, that's pretty cool.
It is. Porters, a type of ale, became very popular in the 1700s, and pale ales became in style in the 1800s.
I love pale ales. Even more, I love IPAs.
Funny, the story why an IPA is called India Pale Ale is because the East India Trading Company would ship their beer loaded with hops with the hopes of preserving their beer throughout their long journeys. That style of beer became very popular in America over the past 2 decades.
So, what happened next?
Well, into the 1800s, new techniques were used with pale malts to make what is now known as a Pilsner. Pilsners are the world's most popular style of beer. They set the new standard in beer making, and this style quickly took storm across Europe and eventually was brought to America.
It did? I thought we invented Pilsners.
No, far from it. Pilsners were invented in the Czech Republic around 1840. Here in America, we have our own history of beer.
Okay, tell me.
Before we settled in this new land, Native Americans were brewing beer using corn. The early colonists in Virginia also made corn beer, probably with the help of the Native Americans. The first brewery in America was founded in 1612, and what we know as the modern age of brewing began about 200 years later in the 1800s. By the mid-1800s, Germans began immigrating to America to escape revolution and war. With them, they brought their preference and recipes for lagers and pilsners.
So, this is when brands like Pabst and Budweiser began in America?
Yes, just about. By 1873, there were over 4,000 breweries in America. But by the turn of the century, consolidation or the buying up of smaller brewers started by some of the bigger ones. Larger brewers like Anheuser-Busch, the maker of the world's biggest selling brands, and Pabst Brewing and Miller Brewing Company started taking off.
Didn't you tell me that something happened right after the turn of the century, around the early 1920s? Something really important to our country.
I did, yes. Prohibition.
Oh yeah, the dark years.
That's right. For 13 long, dark years, America prohibited the sale of any alcohol to any consumer.
Wow, that's a bummer.
It was. During that time, bootleggers and others sold alcohol illegally. But then on April 7, 1933, Congress passed the Cullen-Harrison Act with the re-legalization of beer and wine. However, in December of that year, the 21st Amendment was passed, which repealed the 18th Amendment and officially ended Prohibition.
This is amazing. What a history.
You could say so. From there, America really had some great innovations. We created the first beer can in 1935. In 1965, Fritz Maytag buys the Anchor Brewing Company in San Francisco. Some call that the turning point in American beer, beginning the craft beer revival. By 2009, America has more breweries than any other country in the world.
So, how many breweries are there in America today?
By last count, America has about 7,000 different large and small breweries, and counting.
Matt, this is really cool stuff. I had no idea that beer had that much of a history.
Grant, this is really just the beginning of what you can learn about beer and brewing. There is so much more to tell you.
Well, Matt, I think that's plenty for today.
Okay, I agree. I was about to get my beer geek on, but I can wait.
Thanks for listening and watching The History of Beer. Remember to go to www.facebook.com/shareyourBestPractices and help us create an online community where salespeople like you share their ideas, stories, trends, and successes.
Until next time, good selling!